Okay, welcome everybody. So we are here to celebrate or commemorate the 24th of April. And this is the day of the final arrival of the mother to Pondicherry. The significance that even the mother gave to this day has actually been cited even in the flyer that Vivekji actually created for today. And so the mother says, the anniversary of my return to Pondicherry was the tangible sign of the sure victory over the adverse forces. So this is a very, very interesting comment, and a very interesting insight into what significance the mother actually assigned to this day. That it was not merely commemorating a physical journey, because the mother came back from Japan to Pondicherry. And originally, of course, we know that mother was from France. So her travel actually began from France. But there is an inkling that even when she was leaving France, the mother had a premonition or a kind of foresight or foreknowledge that this was not just a trip that she was taking and she was going to come back. Because there is a passage in the mother's writings where she describes how she said goodbye to all of the beloved things and possessions that she had at her home in France. And it almost sounds like she knew at that point that she would not be seeing them again. So the journey that we are commemorating here is not merely a physical journey. It is actually the decisive coming together of the divine as the Satpurush, the true being, the Param Purush, the supreme being who has taken an avatar. The union of this avatar and his Shakti, who has also manifested in the form of the mother. And the result, the mother says, is that it indicates or is the sign of a sure victory over the adverse forces. So here also there is an element of some kind of a conflict, some struggle. And as we indicated in the topic for today, some war, perhaps, that is in progress, because the mother does not say that this is the victory. She says that this is a sign of the victory. So it is a victory that is in the making. It is a victory in progress. And a very decisive sign, a very decisive development had taken place on this day, on the 24th of April 1920, which constituted a sign of this coming victory over the adverse forces. And this indicates something that is very unique about Sri Aurobindo and the mother, very unique about their yoga. But it is not something unique for the avatar. Because as we see, even in the descent or the coming of the previous avatars, if we think about avatars like Sri Ram and Sri Krishna, there is almost always a giant conflict which is there not just in the background, but almost one can say possibly the most important aspect, or at least the most prominent aspect of what they engage in, what they do, what these avatars do when they actually come to the Acharya Lokun Avtaran Thai, so they say when they come down. So this war is precipitated. As I never tire of pointing out, this is another indication for everybody to understand how unique and how different Sri Aurobindo and the mother are from all the rest of all of the great spiritual luminaries and masters and beings that we rightly honor and revere. All the saints, all the gurus, all the acharyas, all these very great people. Because generally people do approach Mother and Sri Aurobindo with the idea that, oh, they are just like spiritual gurus in another sense, like other spiritual gurus. But you see, in the case of many, if not all or most of these spiritual gurus, there is no indication that there is a war or there's a conflict. It is something very unique or very peculiar to an avatar, the mission and the work that an avatar has to do. So this is another very clear sign, a very definite proof of the avatarhood of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. Because many people say, oh, everybody claims to be an avatar. But then can you show me how many of these people who claim to be an avatar are actually engaged in this conflict, this war? And what is this war that we are talking about here? The war against the adverse forces, or the war that the adverse forces are launching against the avatar. What is this war? And this is another very, very beautiful contribution of Sri Aurobindo to spiritual literature and understanding, that he has really brought out in every aspect the nature of this war. Because there are many wars. Today also, the news is dominated by a war. And that war is happening, as we know, in Ukraine, between Russia and apparently Ukraine, but it's actually a war between the United States and Russia. So it's in effect a kind of a proxy world war in a sense. But fortunately, a lot of other countries have not entered in a full way, so it is still limited and there's still a chance of things coming back or de-escalating. So right now, so there is a war and the news is dominated by it. But what we are talking about here is not a war. What we are talking about is the war. The war as in, there is this one war which is something that is bigger and overshadows and eclipses all other wars. And many wars are part of this war, one would say. And this war is the war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, the forces of evolution and the forces of regression, let us say. This war, this conflict, has been recorded in the very earliest spiritual documents and revelations, which are the Vedas. And in the Vedas, the war takes the form of the war between the gods and the demons. The sons of light versus the sons of darkness. Devas versus the asuras. And you find this war mentioned practically in all world mythologies and all world religions. Angels and demons in the Semitic, the monotheistic traditions. You find them in the old Nordic uh, mythologies also, where the gods are fighting against the titans. Even in the Greek mythology, you find this. But it is there from the beginning in the Vedas themselves. Then you see that this war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, it is something that we see again happening in the Ramayana very clearly. Between the forces of humanity, let's say humanity and other races, let's say the Vanars, for example, all of them uniting against the Rakshasas. The war that we know as the war of Rama and Ravan. And in many aspects, we actually say that Rama was actually born, in some sense, to do this work of fighting this war. So important was it. Even in the Mahabharata, there is this great war. In fact, the very word Mahabharat means great war of the Bharatas. So really it is the Mahabharat Yuddha. And another word for Mahabharata, of course, is Jaya, which is victory. So here also you see that Shri Krishna has to constantly, as it were, fight and battle with all of the demonic forces, starting from Kansa, Jarasandha, culminating in this giant world war, almost one could say, the Mahabharata. And we see the same happening in the life of Mother and Sri Aurobindo as well. Because as we know that during the lifetime of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, this war actually occurred. And not only just any war, but the greatest war ever recorded, the Second World War. The World War I also took place, but the truly awesome and global conflict, which had the greatest and most terrible forces acting on the earth at that time and fighting, that was definitely World War II. And Sri Aurobindo and the mother participated in this World War. We have a statement from the mother where she, in fact, very clearly describes that she took on the form of the appearance of this being of light who Hitler would take as his god and would take his orders and his inspiration from him. And she persuaded Hitler to invade Russia. And everybody today agrees that that was the moment Hitler lost the war. That just by this one act of the mother's, she was able to turn decisively the whole course of this Second World War, without which we would be living in a very, very different world. But it was extremely important that this victory be won, because Sri Aurobindo is very clear. He called it the Mother's War. Not just any war. He said the Mother's War, that the World War II was the Mother's War. And what was at stake was the future, the entire future of humanity, whether it will progress or whether it will regress, whether it will evolve or it will devolve. And if the victory had not been won, consequences would have been cataclysmic and disastrous for humanity. And so Sri Aurobindo and the mother put their full force in this war to fight it and to ensure that humanity was saved. And indeed, every other such war has been the mother's war, because we see even in the story of the genesis of Durga, who for us in the Hindu tradition is the personification of the mother, right? She is born. Why? Because she is born so that she can conquer against the Asura. She's born so she can kill all of these, or destroy all of these different Asuras who are attacking the earth and humanity and the gods and threatening to overturn everything. That, in one sense, was the very purpose of the birth of Durga. So that was definitely clearly very much the mother's war. And even in the Ramayana, we have the character of Sita. And the way we normally approach the character of Sita is we say, oh, she was somebody who was captured by Ravan, who was helpless, who really was just somebody waiting for Rama to rescue her. But if we look at the story closely and what is actually happening, in fact, the reality could not be farther from that statement. Because if you see Rama, Sri Ram, when he meets and fights Ravan, it is only for a few minutes or for whatever short period of time he meets. They have a giant battle at the very end of the war, in which Rama then ultimately destroys Ravan. But apart from that, beyond that, there is not much interaction between Rama, Sri Ram and Ravan. But for Sita, she has to fight Ravan from the beginning till the end. From the moment Ravan appears in front of her in the disguise of this sadhu begging for alms, from that moment till the time Ravan is killed, all of those days, all of those months and years, such a long period of time, she is fighting Ravan. She is engaged in a war with Ravan. And not only that, she has to fight Ravan without any weapons. Just unarmed. She has to take on the greatest evil force in existence and face him down. Not only that, not only does she have to fight him all of this time, not only does she have to fight him without any arms, unarmed, but she has to fight him in his own territory and palace, his own kingdom. She has to fight him on his ground. So can we say now that it was Rama who fought Ravana? 100 times more it is true that Sita fought Ravan without any help, without any arms, and in his lair, in his kingdom, in his palace, in his very place where he is the strongest. She takes him on and she faces him down. That is an amazing thing, which is very, very rare to find. Imagine the willpower, the strength of character, the sheer greatness of Sita. Who can do something like this? And you see that the glory of Sita is as much, if not more, than Sri Ram. And that is why even that war was the mother's war. Although it looks like it was Lord Rama's war, but it was definitely the mother's war, because she fought it much more than him. And there is even more to this story, because people say that it was Rama who was fighting for Sita's honor, to rescue Sita's integrity and dignity from the villain, Ravan. But it is equally true that it is Sita who is fighting for Rama's honor. Because there is this very telling episode in the Ramayana when Hanuman is sent as Shriram's Doot, as his messenger, and he comes with the ring, and that's a very famous, well-known episode, where it's a very celebrated episode, very touching, very beautiful. And when he actually reveals to Sita who he is, why he has come, and he gives her the proof by showing her the ring, he actually says, look, Sita Mata, I can rescue you. I can take you away from here by myself. You don't need to wait for Shriram. It'll be very easy for you. You don't have to be with all of these Rakshasas. You don't have to bear this horrible, disgusting fellow Ravan. You don't have to be insulted, humiliated, threatened, and worry about yourself day in, day out. You can come with me. I can take you away. And what was Sita Mata's reply to Hanuman? She says, no. She declines the offer. Why? Why does she do that? Because she says that Rama must come to rescue me, because without that, he will not be able to reclaim his own honor. What a remarkable thing. What a remarkable and amazing. There is no heroine in the entire literature of humanity like Sita, who makes such a sacrifice because she wants to fight for the honor of her Lord and her husband. If we think about how Parvati went through all of the different austerities and tapasya to gain Shiva, this is what the mother does. She takes on all of these austerities and all of these great difficulties to fulfill her mission. Absolute white sincerity, as Aurobindo referred in one sense, something like that, to the mother in the Savitri. A sea of white sincerity or something like that. But the dedication, the purity, the sheer strength of character, again, it is an absolute indication of the divinity of this being, this person, the mother. So we see that it is not just Ram, but Sita who is fighting. And it is not just Ram who is rescuing Sita. It is Sita who rescues Ram as well. So that too was the mother's war. So whenever the divine comes and fights a war, the mother is there. So this is the war that the mother was referring to even now, when she said that this is a sure indication or sure sign of the victory over the hostile forces. This is there again in the Mahabharata as well. Like, many people tend to assume that the Mahabharata is only the tale of a family dispute. That it was essentially the dispute either of two sides, one who had been really humiliated and oppressed, as in what the Kauravas did to Draupadi, and they had to take revenge or reclaim or win their honor back or really punish the Kauravas, or that this was a war of succession, that the Kauravas had claimed the throne which rightfully belonged to Yudhishthira, and that's why he had to fight the war so that he could get the throne. But this is again the superficial view. This is the surface view. What is the reality? What is the depth here? What is the inner view? And that Sri Krishna gives in the Gita. Because in the Gita itself, there is there are a lot of chapters which generally don't get any attention from anybody. And one such chapter is chapter 16. And that chapter specifically is the Daiva Asura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga. And as the name indicates, it is the chapter in which Sri Krishna differentiates and delineates the differences between the Daivi Sampad and the Asuri Sampad, or the nature and the character of the Daivic humanity, the divine part of humanity, and the Asuric humanity or the Asuric part of humanity. And if you want to look at the justification for the Kurukshetra war, for the Mahabharata war, that is the justification from Sri Krishna's point of view. That why has Sri Krishna come? He has come to defeat this demoniac element, this Asuric element, which has become so strong and risen to such a height. And that is why he is also in the midst of this war. Otherwise, he has no interest. And if it's just a war of succession, if it's just a war of one side avenging the other, that happens every day, right? Why should God take an avatar? Why should God get involved so directly and so personally? Because Sri Krishna clearly says in the 16th chapter that there are these two types of humanity. One is the Asuric, one is the Daivic. And they represent the extremes, the extremely good and the extremely bad. And sometimes they come in this titanic struggle. I mean, they're always in a struggle, but sometimes it takes the form of this very great war. And if the bad side wins and the good side loses, humanity, as we know, is finished or has to undergo terrible, terrible suffering. So to keep humanity evolving, to keep humanity progressing, to make sure that the evolution of humanity keeps going on, which we see embodied in Sri Rama and Sri Krishna. For example, Rama represents the mental idealistic man. And that is why the whole concept of honor is so important. Many people criticize Rama, saying, "Arey, he let his wife go for what? People were gossiping." But you don't understand. The reason why Sri Rama came, why Lord took an avatar, why did Sita Mata also come? Because they wanted to establish this ideal of the Maryada Purushottam, of the ideal of honor, of chivalry, of nobility, and fix it in humanity. And till today, I would say that this is the ideal which is really guiding us. Because after him came Sri Krishna, who said that I'm going to go beyond Maryada. I'm going to go beyond honor. Sarva Dharman Parityaja. I'm going to go beyond Dharma. And I will establish the ideal of moksha, the ideal of the yogic living in life, in the battlefield of life, which much fewer people can do than people who live just for honor and dignity and nobility, although that's just rare by itself. I mean, if you look at people, how many people live for honor? How many people live for dignity and nobility? Everybody lives to have fun and to make money, and they need to make sure that they have as many comforts and conveniences in life, and then for whatever time that they have been given existence. So this evolution must continue. The evolution of man from a very, very degenerate and ignorant state to slowly, where he then ascends to the point where he can become like Rama and live a life dedicated to honor, a life dedicated to dignity, and a life committed to nobility. That is why this whole concept of honor is so important. And that is why this idea, this honor is supreme. Not just his own honor, but Sita's honor, for which Rama has to do her parityaga. And people say, how can he do that? Because you don't understand. You don't live for honor. You don't live for nobility and dignity, which is what Rama and Sita came to do. And that's why they took on all of this suffering, so much struggle and pain on themselves. And that is what we see in the life of Aurobindo and the mother also, because they came to evolve the progression of humanity even further beyond Sri Rama and Sri Krishna to a divine perfection on earth, and to give the message of the supramental consciousness and force. And that's why the war that they engaged in was much more ferocious, much more terrible than what even the Kauravas faced. What were the Pandavas faced from the Kauravas, or what Sri Ram faced from Ravana. Because that was the level at which they were fighting. So, if we look at the current situation also in the world, there is something very extraordinary that people seem to have missed, because again, nobody has the eyes to see, of course, that in this war with Ukraine, or the war between America and Russia, there's a very significant point where you can say the war really started, when Putin actually made a declaration that he was going to liberate these provinces of Ukraine, or separate them away from Ukraine. That was essentially his declaration of war on Ukraine. And do you know what date he issued that? Anybody want to take a guess? It was actually February the 21st. So that declaration of war which Putin issued was something that came on the mother's birthday. Not only that, this is a conflict which is coming in a year that is very significant to us, because this is the 150th birth centenary of Sri Aurobindo. So you can sort of see now behind the scenes that this is not just an ordinary conflict, that there are forces again behind it which are greater, larger than what we see as just nations fighting. Because there was a declaration even from Hitler once that he was going to conquer Britain. He was going to put his actual foot soldiers and troops into Britain and land them on Britain, which he never was able to do. But if he had done it, then he would have won the whole war. And he said, the date that I'm going to do it is 15th August. So here again, we see that a very significant date is something that is chosen almost to begin hostilities. So this is not to say that Putin is bad and Ukraine is good, or America is good, or America is bad. No, the point is that they are all puppets and instruments. And that this war is essentially a means to inject violence, aggression, disturbance, suffering, and anguish into a very sacred year. Interestingly, even in Sri Aurobindo's birth centenary, which was 1972, there was another war which happened, a much more significant war for India, not for the world. And that was the war between India and Pakistan for the liberation of Bangladesh. So Bangladesh was also liberated at or around Sri Aurobindo's birth centenary. Again, almost as a sign that this is related to Sri Aurobindo, because Sri Aurobindo, of course, loved Bengal and wanted Bengal to be the center, if not a center, or a center, if not the center of his yogic activities, from which he would spread it out to the rest of the world. Of course, things took a different turn, but he always loved Bengal. And in the year of his birth centenary itself, something so massive happened for Bengal that it broke away from this Asuric nation of Pakistan and became at least independent, if it had not recovered yet its unity with India. So again, here also, we can see that this conflict that we are going through today is a means for these hostile forces to do as much as they can to spoil things. But again, as in the case of 1922, Mother is there, Sri Aurobindo is there, and they know what needs to be done. And this conflict too will lead to something good, ultimately. That is our hope and our prayer. And yet the bigger picture behind this war is, why do we still keep going through these conflicts? Why do we still continue to experience these great catastrophes? Because the mission and the vision that India as a country and Indians as a people have been given, we are not yet fulfilling to our greatest capacity. Indeed, we have not even taken it up consciously. Because India is the divinely chosen country to give to the world the truth, the message of what is really the purpose of the existence of humanity. What is the meaning of human life? Which is to find the divine within oneself, to embody the divine. And this is a message, this is a vision that is very clear in any scripture, in any tradition that we take from India. And it is something that has not yet really taken on a momentum. So the world is still in the grip of the forces of ignorance, of the forces of violence. So this is an indication of why India needs to rise, why we as Indians need to really take up our mission and not just live our little lives and you took birth, you had a family, you did a job and you died. That's not the only purpose. We are here to help the world. We are here to do the divine's work and to find the divine. This is a message which SAYFNA, the mother, has given us always. And what is going to happen is that when we take this mission up consciously, when we decide that we are going to live our lives to find and to embody the divine, if not in this life, in some other life, but at least we will make progress. We will dedicate ourselves to this goal and we will do sadhana or we live so that we can work for the divine, work for the mother, serve the divine. Any of these things, what happens is that we unlock the greatest force in all of existence, in the whole cosmos, in the whole universe. There's no force greater than this, which Aurobindo called the divine grace. The divine grace is available to everybody and it will act in ways that we cannot anticipate, and it will act whether we do anything or not. But there is a way for us to deliberately, consciously will for its action to manifest. And this is by surrendering ourselves to the divine. And this again is the keynote of Aurobindo's yoga itself, that surrender to the divine, surrender to the divine mother. Because what does that do? Because when you surrender, then you are saying to the divine that not my effort, but your power is going to do what needs to be done. And however great a human being is, can they compare to the divine power? No. Can they compare to the divine grace? Absolutely not. And that is why it is the most powerful method where we can help the world as well. By really offering ourselves up to the great work of Mother and SAYFNA, by offering our lives to them, and by acting as representatives of humanity and of earth and of the world, by saying, come down, O divine grace. You're already here in the form of Mother and SAYFNA. Bring that grace into everything. Let it bring peace and this aspiration for progress in the whole world. And give every part and every movement, as today we read in this darshan card, that harmony and beauty of the mind and soul, harmony and beauty of thoughts and feelings, harmony and beauty in every outward act and movement. What does that mean? It is a way of us saying that these movements, all of my thoughts and feelings, they are for the divine, not for my personal self-satisfaction, not for my ego, not for my own aims, but to live for the divine. And once we do that, gradually, progressively over time, things will really change. You will see things changing for yourself. But not only that, you will be doing the best service that you can give for all the people around you and for humanity and for the world. So I will end with this 2 lines from SAYFNA, because I see we're already at 12 o'clock. And these 2 lines for me are very inspiring, because they're very beautifully put. Of course, everything in SAYFNA is very beautiful. And hopefully I remember them correctly. So they are these. Earth is the chosen place of mightiest souls. Earth is the chosen place of mightiest souls. Earth is the heroic spirit's battlefield. Earth is the heroic spirit's battlefield. So this is something that is a great privilege, in a sense, for all of us to participate in this this forward movement against the forces that resist. Whether there is conflict, there is struggle, it is a sign that we are actually moving forward. Otherwise, why would the hostile forces struggle against us? Why would they fight against us? Because if we take the position of, let's say, how many people interpret traditional spirituality, they say, oh, my spirituality means I have to escape, I have to leave, I have to just get out of this world and just leave it to its problems and sufferings. And the hostile forces are happy. They will say, oh, sure, how can I make it easier for you, sir? Come, I will myself escort you out of the world. But what Sri Krishna is saying, what Sri Aurobindo is saying are very different. What Sri Krishna is saying is that you fight. Right? Yuddhasva see that fight, stand up and fight and you will win. And after Sri Krishna, who says that? Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo says, stand up and let us take the world out of the grip of the hostile forces, of the adverse forces, and help it fulfill its destiny. And that is why it becomes this kind of a struggle. But here also, we don't have to fight. We are not expected to. We are expected to be absolutely sincere and surrender completely and call in the mother, call in the divine grace and force for support, and do this work to fight using us as our instruments, or in whatever way it feels that this war needs to be fought. And then victory is sure. And if there's maybe I can just share one prayer which the mother has given, which even today the students of the Sri Aurobindo Ashram school, even today they say this prayer. And what is this prayer? It says, this was basically given by the mother on 21st February again, 1952. It's a very famous prayer. It says, make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. Make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. At one point, mother said that when Sri Aurobindo was there in his physical body, at that time, even then you had to be warriors if you wanted to succeed in the yoga. But when Sri Aurobindo left his body, then she said, now the demand has become even more. Now you have to be even more than warriors. You have to be heroes. So here in 1952, mother says that this is the prayer that we have to recite. It says, make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. May we fight successfully the great battle of the future that is to be born against the past that seeks to endure, so that the new things may manifest and we may be ready to receive them. So I will try to stop the recording here and maybe we can just meditate for 1 minute. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to ask, anything they want to add? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording here and we'll take 1 minute just silent meditation, okay?